If you're over 60 and no longer experiencing intimacy, you might think it's simply a natural part of aging. But what if I told you that giving up on sex is not just about missing pleasure? It's quietly costing you your vitality, your brain health, and even your identity. In this video, Dr. James reveals the hidden dangers of losing intimacy after 60. From memory decline to hormonal imbalance, from emotional isolation to reduced lifespan, the risks are real and often invisible. But the good news is, it's never too late to reconnect, to reawaken that part of you, and to live with passion again. This isn't about youth. It's about reclaiming what still belongs to you, closeness, affection, and the joy of being fully alive. Consequence 1. Your brain begins to age faster than it should. At first glance, losing intimacy in your later years may seem like a harmless shift, just a quiet change in lifestyle. But what most people don't realize is that when intimacy fades, the brain doesn't simply feel lonely. It begins to age. Faster, sharper declines in memory, focus, and emotional well-being often follow in its wake. And the scary part? It doesn't happen all at once. It creeps in silently, like a dimming light you don't notice until the room is almost dark. Dr. James shares the story of George, a 72-year-old retired math teacher. George wasn't showing any outward signs of dementia or illness, but his sharpness was fading. He forgot names, lost track of thoughts, and felt perpetually foggy. Nothing in his medical tests gave answers. But one conversation changed everything. George revealed he hadn't experienced any sexual intimacy since his wife passed away 5 years earlier. To some, that might seem unrelated, but science paints a different picture. Sexual intimacy is not just about physical pleasure. It activates a cascade of neurochemical events: dopamine for motivation and reward, oxytocin for bonding and calm, and endorphins, natural mood boosters. It increases blood flow to the brain, especially in the regions responsible for memory, learning, and emotional regulation. Without these natural reinforcements, the brain doesn't just slow down, it weakens. This is especially true after 60, when the brain is already more vulnerable to age-related cognitive decline. The loss of regular intimacy strips the brain of a vital form of stimulation, one that can be replaced by crossword puzzles or medication. Intimacy in all its forms, touch, connection, closeness, keeps the emotional and cognitive circuits alive. When that goes, the wiring begins to fray. There's a deeper danger too. Without intimacy, people often start withdrawing emotionally and socially. They lose the desire to engage, to connect, to be present. This shrinking of emotional life feeds depression and anxiety, which in turn speeds up neurological aging. It becomes a vicious loop: less intimacy, less stimulation, more decline. And it's not just a theory. Studies have found that older adults who maintain emotional and physical closeness with others, whether through romantic relationships or even deep friendship, perform better on memory tests, are less likely to develop dementia, and report a higher overall sense of purpose. But perhaps the most heartbreaking part is this: many seniors don't realize what's happening until the damage is already deep. They accept forgetfulness, low mood, and disconnection as part of aging, when in reality it may be the result of unmet emotional and physical needs. They say, "I'm just getting old," without realizing that they've silently given up on something their brain still craves. The good news? It's never too late to change this. Intimacy doesn't have to mean intercourse. A gentle touch, shared laughter, meaningful eye contact, these small moments spark big changes in the brain. They reawaken dormant neural pathways. They remind the brain that it's still connected, still needed, still alive. So if you've been feeling foggy, forgetful, or emotionally flat, ask yourself, when was the last time you felt truly close to someone? When was the last time your heart beat faster from warmth, affection, or touch? The answer might hold the key to protecting your brain, not with pills, but with presence. Because aging well isn't just about keeping your body fit. It's about keeping your mind alive, and connection is the fire that fuels it. Consequence 2: circulation and hormonal decline. It's easy to believe that after a certain age, fatigue, weight gain, and a sense of sluggishness are just part of getting older. But what if I told you that these changes might not be aging alone? In truth, The quiet absence of intimacy could be playing a much larger role than anyone dares to admit. Dr. James recalls sitting with a couple, Linda and Carl, in their late 60s. Married for nearly 40 years, they had weathered life together with resilience. But in recent years, their physical relationship had slowly faded. "We just assumed that part of our life was over," Linda said, her tone a mix of guilt and resignation. Carl, sitting beside her, nodded in agreement, but admitted something that struck deep. "I didn't feel like myself anymore." He felt older than his years, tired, unmotivated, weak. And when Dr. James dug deeper, one thing stood out. They had gone years without intimacy of any kind. This is not uncommon, but it is dangerously misunderstood. You see, sexual activity, especially as we age, does far more than provide emotional closeness. It's physiological, it's chemical, it's systemic. When we engage in physical intimacy, whether through intercourse, affectionate touch, or simply emotional closeness, our bodies respond by releasing a powerful cocktail of hormones and increasing blood flow to critical organs. When intimacy fades, here's what happens behind the scenes. Circulation declines, sexual arousal increases heart rate, and improves vascular responsiveness. Without this stimulation, blood vessels become less elastic. Oxygen delivery slows, muscles receive less fuel. The heart doesn't work as efficiently, and even the brain gets less of what it needs to stay sharp. Hormonal balance shifts. In men, testosterone begins to drop steadily without sexual stimulation. The result? Loss of muscle mass, fatigue, irritability, depression, and even erectile dysfunction. Not because of old age alone, but due to the absence of hormonal activity that intimacy helps maintain. In women, the story is equally important. A lack of physical closeness can lead to a sharp decline in estrogen and oxytocin. These hormonal shifts can cause joint pain, vaginal dryness, mood swings, and increase the risk of osteoporosis. But perhaps more devastating is the emotional impact, the feeling of no longer being desired, feminine, or worthy of touch. These aren't surface-level changes. They alter how we sleep, how we move, and how we feel in our own skin. Dr. James emphasizes a critical truth. The loss is gradual. People don't wake up one day and feel old. It's a slow drift. One day you skip the gym, the next you're waking up more tired. A week later you're gaining weight and feeling less connected to your partner. Eventually you look in the mirror and wonder, where did I go? The tragedy is that many older adults accept these shifts as permanent, when in reality much of it can be reversed, or at least dramatically improved, with the return of intimacy. And no, it doesn't have to mean performance or pressure. Even the gentle presence of affection can reawaken the body's natural rhythms. The vascular system is like any muscle. Use it or lose it. The same is true for hormones. Stimulation, even emotional or sensory, can reactivate dormant systems. With time, desire returns, strength follows, mood lifts. Dr. James explains it best. You don't need to run marathons in the bedroom. You just need to remind your body that it's still wanted, still capable, still alive. So if you felt heavier, slower, or simply not yourself, consider whether disconnection, not just age, might be to blame, because your body doesn't stop needing intimacy just because birthdays have passed. What it truly needs is to be remembered. Consequence 3. Relationship and self-worth may quietly suffer. There's a silence that settles into long-term relationships when intimacy fades. It doesn't shout, it doesn't slam doors, it just hangs in the air like dust on old furniture, soft, quiet, and heavy. Over time, that silence can become louder than any argument, eating away at not only connection between partners, but also how each person sees themselves. Dr. James tells the story of Margaret, a 74-year-old woman whose husband had survived cancer. The ordeal had left them both exhausted. Their physical connection faded without either of them planning it. One day she sat in his office and said something that struck a deep chord. "I don't want him to feel pressured, but I miss being touched. I miss feeling like someone's partner, not just their caregiver." That statement captures something many older adults feel, but rarely say out loud. When physical closeness disappears, so does a part of our identity. Intimacy at its core is not just about sex. It's about being seen, felt, and known. It's the way a soft glance says, "I still choose you," It's the warmth of skin that reminds us we're not alone in this body, in this life. When we lose that, we start to question things we once took for granted. Am I still attractive? Do I still matter? Am I still lovable? In couples, this loss can slowly corrode the foundation of connection. One partner may interpret distance as rejection. The other may withdraw out of shame or fear of failure. They both feel the gap, but don't know how to close it, especially when words feel clumsy and bodies feel foreign. Dr. James has seen it time and time again. Two good people sitting inches apart on a couch, but emotionally miles away. They don't fight, they don't argue, but the intimacy is gone. The laughter, the playfulness, the spontaneous affection, they've all faded. In their place is routine, respect, duty, but not closeness. And what's often worse is the shame that grows in that silence. Many begin to think the loss of connection is their fault, that their aging body is to blame, that they're no longer enough. It's a quiet unraveling of self-worth, happening inside people who once felt confident, vibrant, and desirable. And this doesn't only apply to couples. Single seniors, widows, widowers, all face a similar threat. When we stop being touched, when we go months or years without affectionate connection, the brain begins to interpret that as isolation. Emotional numbness sets in, motivation slips, and the longer this persists, the harder it becomes to believe we deserve closeness. But here's the deeper truth. We never stop needing intimacy because we never stop being human. Being touched, being held, being wanted, these are not privileges of youth. They are basic emotional needs. They reinforce that we are still alive, still lovable, still here. And when they are withheld by circumstance, illness, or fear, the damage isn't just physical, it reaches the soul. The worst part? Most people never talk about it. They suffer in silence, mistaking resignation for maturity. They believe wanting affection at 70 or 80 is inappropriate or silly. But Dr. James reminds us there is nothing more appropriate than the desire to be close. In fact, that desire is a sign that your heart still beats for connection, and that is something to honor, not hide. So what can be done? It starts with small moments, a gentle hand on the shoulder, a shared laugh, a vulnerable conversation, even simply saying, "I miss you." These are the first steps to rebuilding intimacy, not in the bedroom, but in the bond between two people, or even the bond between you and yourself. You are still someone worth holding, worth loving, worth reaching for, and it is never too late to believe that again. Consequence 4. Loss of intimacy may shorten your life. It's not something people like to talk about, but the numbers don't lie. Intimacy, physical, emotional, even affectionate touch, is closely linked to how long and how well we live. And when it disappears, something far more serious than loneliness begins to unfold. Not just emotional sadness, not just sexual frustration, but measurable biological decline. Dr. James recalls a man named Robert, 81 years old, sharp-minded, witty, and full of life. While many of his peers seemed to fade with age, Robert still carried a spark. His eyes lit up when he spoke. His steps were steady. His laughter was easy. When asked about the secret to his vitality, Robert simply said, "I still flirt with my wife every morning. We hold each other every night. And sometimes we still make love." What Robert may not have realized is that his habits weren't just romantic, they were medicinal. You see, science has shown over and over again that consistent, affectionate intimacy has profound effects on the body's systems. Oxytocin and endorphins, released during physical closeness, reduce inflammation, lower blood pressure, and ease chronic pain. Cortisol levels, our primary stress hormone, drop significantly after loving touch, improving immune function and emotional resilience. Even sleep improves. Touch and intimacy help regulate circadian rhythms, allowing the body to repair itself more effectively each night. But when intimacy fades, the reverse begins. Chronic stress lingers, blood pressure creeps upward, inflammatory markers rise, sleep becomes shallow and fragmented, energy drops, motivation dries up, and perhaps most insidiously of all, the immune system weakens, leaving the body vulnerable to illness and chronic disease. Studies like the one published in the British Medical Journal show that seniors who remain physically and emotionally connected live significantly longer than their isolated peers. Not marginally longer, years longer. This isn't about sex in the traditional sense. It's not about performance or frequency. It's about touch, connection, presence. And when that disappears, even silently, your biology responds with signals of decline. Dr. James has seen it too many times. Older adults who resign themselves to being done with intimacy slowly lose that inner fire. They stop laughing as much. They get sick more often. They spend more time alone, not because they want to, but because they no longer feel like they're part of life. One patient put it perfectly. When no one wants to touch you anymore, you start to disappear. That statement isn't poetic, it's physiological. The body interprets disconnection as threat, and it responds the only way it knows how, by downshifting into survival mode. When touch, warmth, and love are absent, we don't thrive. We retreat. We dim. But here's the truth. It doesn't have to be this way. Reconnection doesn't require youth, perfect health, or romance. It requires willingness. A hand held longer than usual, a heartfelt hug, eye contact that says, "You matter to me." These small gestures send powerful messages to the nervous system. You're safe, you're seen, you belong. And that signal alone can ignite healing, physically, emotionally, spiritually. So if you've been living in quiet withdrawal, assuming that affection is something behind you, let this be your permission. It's not over. The part of you that wants to be touched, loved, cherished, it never stopped existing. It just stopped being invited. Reignite it. Not to prove you're young again, but to remind yourself that you're still here, and you're still worth every heartbeat. Consequence 5. It's never too late to start again. English by now, you've heard the science, the stories, and the silent struggles. You've seen how the absence of intimacy can affect your brain, your body, your relationships, and even your time on this earth. But here's where everything shifts. Because in the middle of all that loss, there's one truth that shines brighter than all the others. It is never too late. Dr. James remembers Eleanor, 78 years old, elegant, articulate, and heartbreakingly honest. She came into his office, sat down, and after a long pause whispered, "I miss feeling like a woman. Not a grandmother, not a patient, just a woman." Those words carried years of quiet longing. It had been over a decade since she'd experienced any form of physical affection. She wasn't sick, she wasn't broken, but somewhere along the way, she had accepted a silent narrative that said intimacy was behind her, that this part of her life was closed, forgotten. But she was wrong, and thankfully, so was her story. Dr. James helped Eleanor begin again, not with pressure, not with expectation, but with permission. Permission to want, to hope, to touch, to connect. And from the smallest of moments, holding a hand, allowing someone to sit close, letting her voice tremble with truth, Eleanor started to reawaken, not just emotionally, biologically, spiritually. This isn't magic, it's humanity. It's what happens when the soul is no longer silenced. You see, age doesn't erase your need for affection. It doesn't cancel your worthiness of love. It only changes how you access it. Your body may respond differently. Your energy may shift. But intimacy never expires because it was never about youth. It was always about being seen, wanted, connected. So many people believe that once they've been alone too long or disconnected too deeply, there's no way back. That it's selfish, silly, or even shameful to still want affection in their 70s or 80s. But let me tell you, there is nothing shameful about a heart that still beats for closeness. The truth is, you are not done, and starting again doesn't require grand gestures. It doesn't begin in the bedroom. It begins in the mindset. A shift from "I'm too old" to "I still can." A willingness to take one small step toward reconnection. Maybe it's talking to your partner. Maybe it's touching your own hand with compassion. Maybe it's simply not shutting down when your heart stirs at a memory or a smile. Dr. James has seen the transformations. People in their 70s who fall in love again. Couples in their 80s who start laughing again, kissing again, rediscovering each other after decades of distance. Not because their bodies changed, but because their beliefs did. Intimacy doesn't belong to the young, it belongs to the living. And if you're alive, then the chapter isn't closed, not even close. So if something inside you has stirred during this message, if a part of you whispered, maybe I could, then listen. That whisper is your soul calling you forward, to healing, to hope, to connection. You are not too old. You are not too far gone. You are not forgotten. You are not finished. You're just getting ready to begin again. If you've made it this far, thank you. Not just for listening, but for being open to truth, to change, to hope. You've seen how intimacy shapes the brain, the body, the heart, and even your future. But most importantly, you've seen that none of it is final. Reconnection is always possible. Love doesn't retire. Desire doesn't expire. What you long for is not behind you. It's waiting ahead. If only you're willing to take one small step. So take it, because the next chapter of your life could be the most meaningful one yet.